Hi, hello, so I'm back with another video. This is another requested video from Trap Law Ross. This is Murder in the Six, Toronto's Deadly Gang War. I'm sure somebody asked me to react to something similar to this before. I think it was, I forgot what it was called. I think it was called Tales of Toronto, The Crazy Story Top 5. If you still want me to check that out, then let me know in the comments. But before I jump into this, make sure you jump over to my Instagram, follow me over there. A huge thank you for the love, the support. Also, I'll keep you in the loop and let you know when I'm dropping new reaction videos, so make sure you jump over there. I think I'm going to split this into two parts. It is over an hour long, so this will just be a two-part reaction. But yeah, I'm going to be learning a lot of things because I'm not too familiar with the gang war in Toronto and stuff like that, so this is all fresh and new for me. If I need to know anything, or if there's any information in this video that isn't quite right, let me know in the comments, which you normally do anyway, so thank you for that. But anyways guys, thank you for watching, and I'm gonna jump straight into it.
Gunfire breaking out in front of a packed nightclub. The chaotic scene left 3 people shot, sending a man in his 20s to hospital with life-threatening injuries. 2 others, a man and a woman, rushed to hospital with serious injuries.
They found this victim at the scene, suffering multiple gunshot wounds in life-threatening condition.
Artist has been connecting with fans on social media. There's just one problem. He's also on the run, wanted for murder.
I'm telling them, if they want to meet me, call John Toy, reach out. If John Toy reaches out, I'm linking up with anybody.
One man died on scene. Witnesses say he was shot in the head. The other taken to hospital where he succumbed to his injuries. The third victim remains in hospital.
They trying to frame me for some shit like that.
Are they trying to frame? Oh, no, man.
I heard gunshots, and then I could hear like people yelling, and then you heard sirens for a good hour.
At 2 crime scenes, a man and a woman were dead, 3 others injured. The man killed in the club, covered up just beside the pool.
Welcome home.
Our residents heard several gunshots around 10:30 last night. Police rushed here. They found a 28-year-old man with no vital signs. I'm told he was shot in the head and actually died slumped up against the doorway of one of the units.
This was the scene last night of the city's latest homicide, where a 29-year-old man was shot dead.
A man masked up right here came.
Let me know in the comments as well, because I know this video is 2 years old, so let me know if there is still a gang war going on in Toronto. If you know, obviously I've not watched the whole video, so well, let me know what it's like in Toronto now. If you're from there, or if you just know in general, let me know in the comments.
Around, start.
I know Canada might not be the first place when you think about gangs or drillings. And to many people, Toronto's most famous shooter is that idiot that gave Megan Thee Stallion a leg ads. But make no mistake, people, the streets of Canada are cold. The blocks are hot and anyone can get it. It's funny, in a lot of ways, the drill scene in Canada has a lot of similarity with the drill scene in the UK. But the reality is, Canada is a lot closer to the US, both geographically and in the locals' ability to access high-powered firearms. But before we get to the firepower, let me first give you a quick geography lesson. First off, you've got America, or more specifically, the Americas, you know, all of them. Then up top, you've got North America. And then north of the United States of America, in North America, is Canada. And in Canada, there are 13 provinces. One of those is called Ontario, and the capital city of that province is Toronto. And the wider surrounding area is known as the Greater Toronto Area, or GTA for short. And I'll tell you what, some of the stories we're going to talk about today sound like they are straight out of GTA 2. I mean, hell, Toronto's crack-smoking former mayor Rob Ford looks like something straight out of Los Santos. Anyway,
no, because you know, these presidents and these high-powered people be doing things, you know, and it's crazy. Like, it's just crazy sometimes to think certain people have a big responsibility with with humans and like big decisions in general. Like, it can be very, very scary.
Oh, Toronto's crack-smoking former mayor Rob Ford looks like something straight out of Los Santos. Anyway, the city of Toronto is split into 6 administrative districts. Etobicoke, Scarborough, Old Toronto, East York, York, and North York, which is where the majority of today's story will be taking place. But of course, like any story covering a long and illustrious street feud, there's always 2 sides to the story and 2 sides of town. And when it comes to the underworld underworld of Toronto, the city is further split into two distinctive halves, with a number of internet hood maps having circulated for years, showing the divide between Toronto's up-top and down-bottom gangs. Meanwhile, there are even more complicated and interactive gang maps that circulate online that can give you a much more detailed and nuanced breakdown of the smaller gang sets that run strips of turf in Toronto's underworld. So today, I'm going to break it all down for you, telling you the come-up story of some of the most famous Toronto rappers to come out of these areas, from Pressa to Top 5 to Smoke Dogg to Houdini.
Okay, so let me look at these rappers because I've seen Pressa before. I've not heard music or seen music videos, I don't think, but I have heard of Pressa. I haven't heard of anybody else. I have seen Top 5. I've seen his face, I think, but I don't know if that's because I was looking at videos someone requested me to watch, but so this is fresh and new for me.
I'm going to tell you about the many shocking murders that some of these rappers witnessed in the streets during their come-up, and I'm going to tell you the tragic stories of some of the people who didn't make it out. There's a lot of sad stories behind it, but the reality is Toronto's rap scene is absolutely booming. I'm excited to tell you everything about it, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and we're going to get to all of that, but first, a word from our sponsor.
Okay, sir.
We gon' never browse the net without a VPN again. Look, Atlas VPN's a tool that encrypts all your data.
Okay, not the chains as well. Cut the chains.
Will encrypt your info and protect you from online threats. And the data breach monitor is the best. It scans and checks if your email and password was stolen before. So hit the link in the description. They're offering a great discount on their super awesome free year subscription. It's time to start using a VPN, don't be a victim. Atlas VPN will work.
How long is this ad though?
It's the perfect service to stay secure and stay private. And unless you watch some things, see your restrictions hiding like top.
I'm here for the vibe, Traveler, but we gotta move forward. Okay. Love the creativity though.
So first off, we've got the rappers and clappers coming from the north side, aka up top. Probably one of the most famous neighborhoods in Toronto drill culture is Jane and Finch, named after the nearby Jane Street and Finch Avenue. And you've also got nearby Driftwood off Driftwood Avenue and the Driftwood Call. Now, north side Jane and Finch and the surrounding areas have had a notoriously bad reputation in Toronto, with numerous articles having been written in the local media about just how dangerous it gets, with it regularly coming up as having the highest shooting rate in all of the city's police divisions.
Wow.
Of course, bearing some of the responsibility for the many local shootings are street gangs like the Driftwood Crips, who have been targeted by the Toronto police extensively. There was a massive bust on the Driftwood Crips in 2017 dubbed Project Chronic, where over 100 arrests and over 600 charges were handed out around 2017, with it even being said in court papers that the Driftwood Crips were out here supplying large amounts of fentanyl and cocaine to a network of dealers that even included Hell's Angels biker gangs. These Driftwood mans are out here on some lost and damned shit. But it's not all about Bloods and Crips in North Jane and Driftwood. A lot of rappers hailing from this area with ties to the streets identify as 3L. Now, I'm pretty sure that 3L stands for 3 letters, and those 3 letters are SOS, which means shoot on sight. So yeah, you don't want to get cited by these guys. But of course, aside from the shooters, what we're really interested in are the musicians. And one of the first rappers from this area to put their hood on and pioneer original music in the area was Robin Banks. He was pushing a Chicago drill-inspired Toronto rap sound as early as 2014 after releasing the breakout track Don't Try Me, coming along with a music video that featured the local hoods of Jane and Finch and Driftwood extensively. But it wasn't just on the mic where Robin Banks was making moves, because he also started the Up Top Movement record label in an attempt to provide infrastructure and a system for his homies from the same area to also put out music. Now, Robin Banks would go on to drop several iconic songs in the Toronto drill scene, like Next Up, Marley's Off a Molly, Club TT, and eventually the Up Top Movement would even drop their Northside Jane mixtape, introducing the world to a whole bunch of Up Top affiliated rappers who from 2015 have all tried to bring a certain kind of Chicago drill energy to their own Toronto hoods. And in my opinion, a lot of the music that's come out of the city is absolute fire. A lot of these guys have dropped trap bangers with hard beats, rapping about all the street goings on in their local area, telling the world for the first time the realities of life growing up hard in the most dangerous area of Toronto. But of course, naturally, that does mean plenty of dissing and smoking on ops. Anywho, some of the other big names that came out of that Northside Jane and Up Top movement include one of the most talented and most famous names associated associated with Toronto drill, Houdini. In fact, he was clearly destined for greatness in the drill world from early, after going viral as a teenager for posting a picture of him having put Chief Keef lyrics in his literacy test, which Chief Keef himself even retweeted. So Houdini begun his career collaborating on the track 456 along with fellow local rapper Burner Bands. Also on that track was the brother-brother duo, the Tall Up Twins, made up of Double Trouble 4400 and 4400. Also coming out of up top, you've got rappers like YG35, YS, GD, FB. You've got another brother-brother rapping duo, 21 Neat and 22 Neat, or 22 Filthy, with those two rapping together under the name Neat Gang. But of course, probably the most famous name to have come out of Jane and Finch is the babyface badass Pressa. He's one of the very few and probably the biggest rapper to escape the streets of Toronto completely and go mainstream in music, moving to LA to focus on his career and get away from the violence. Now, Pressa has a crazy family history and he's been a real G from a very young age. His father, Mark Gardner, was a bank robber who went on to commit murder in 1996, apparently calmly shooting a bouncer dead outside of a community dance because he had made him wait too long to get in. Pressa's dad was sentenced to 15 years to life for murder, with a brief attempt to get out of jail thwarted in 2010 when he was accused of still running a gang from behind the wall. In fact, he even managed to get a brief stint on bail, which ironically took place while Pressa himself was in jail.
Yeah, he's still locked up. He came out on probation for I don't know, I can't remember, probably just under a year or maybe. And then he got violated for his parole, so he's still in there now. Actually, when he came out of jail, I went into jail. He came out and he was answering my calls now, you know?
Anyway, Pressa's dad was aptly nicknamed Prestige, and this is where Pressa's rap name comes from. Prestige, Pressa, Prestige, Pressa. Now, Pressa himself got his first big debut in the rap game on the 2015 Posse Cup Wasi. The track itself featured Pressa, Robin Banks, GD.
How old is Pressa? Let me know in the comments how old Pressa is, please.
And FB, and was a tribute to their fallen friend Wasi, which is why sometimes you'll hear the G's from these areas referring to themselves as Wasi Gang too. Now, similar to Robin Banks, Pressa and his brother would actually go on to start their own record label, Blue Feather Records. And once his career picked up steam, Pressa went on to have one of the most illustrious careers of a non-singing rapper to ever come out of his city. But we'll get to Pressa's impressive run in the music industry later on. But for now, let's look at some more demons. Because around 20 minutes drive away from Jane and Finch is another notorious Toronto hood named Lawrence Heights, or Jungle. And this is home to Go Get'em Gang, aka the GGGs, aka the GGs. This is a feared crew of Toronto hitters, headed up by the self-proclaimed demon of Toronto, Top 5. And his story is crazy. Now, he picked up a lot of steam back in 2014, 15, 16, when he was only 16 years old, when the self-styled Shirt Off Shorty dropped the tracks Hall of Fame with Robin Banks, followed by the track Shirt Off on Any Block. You know, his thing was that he had his shirt off all the time.
Okay.
Shirt Off Shorty. And eventually, these Shirt Off Six Hood anthems managed to attract the attention of the Six God himself, Drake, who would give Top 5 shirtless shout-outs on his IG numerous times, as well as even going as far as to shout out Top 5 on hit songs like his collab with Future Grammy, with that shout-out giving Top 5 a moment of supercharged clout that he reacted to with sheer delight. Drake would go on to drop the short film Jungle, supposedly inspired by Top 5's hood, and Top 5 himself would end up spending time personally rubbing shoulders with Drake himself. But don't let that sweet shirtless boy fool you. Top 5 is not to be played with. In fact, he would let it go on to claim that all that hanging out with Drake was because he was Drake's shooter.
If somebody that doesn't like Drake comes to the city, we're taking care of that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm a shooter, basically.
Yeah. So you the streets.
As if he's just saying that.
But the truth is, Top 5 has been attached to some serious crimes. But we're going to get into all of that later as the story goes on. But back to the GG's lineup, Top 5 also had a brother that went by the name Foolish, as well as a homie that goes by the name Flipper, who Top 5 actually collaborated on his 2019 song Drill Some More. And you've also got Top 5's right-hand man 100, who I've personally got a lot of love for purely because he's one of the few Toronto rappers that actually raps over UK drill beats. And just a bit of advice for any Toronto mans that are just trying to blow up real fast. That's what we're trying to hear, man. Jump on those Pop Smoke beats, you're going to be popping. Check out 100's track, Pop Out, you'll see what I mean. In fact, while we're on the topic, I also can't forget the GG's top UK shooter, Roadman Shaq.
Man's not hot right now. Okay, Top 5. UK to Toronto.
Not Shaq.
Come on, man. The thing goes scrap.
But really, though, I know there's other Toronto rappers coming out of these areas that I could talk about, but I haven't got all day, and these are the rappers and areas that are going to be relevant for the stories that we're going to be talking about today. So before we get into the dangerous feuds that these guys have had on the streets of Toronto, we've of course got to take a closer look at the opposing crews on the other side of town, down bottom. So So in opposition to the crews we've just mentioned, there's a number of other hoods around Toronto that have issues with the up-top rappers. I've seen some of these crews described as down-bottom, but really Toronto's gang politics is kind of complicated, and there's a handful of all splintered little groups having their own little beats. So I'm just going to make this as simple as possible. But one of the most significant areas on this side of town involved in Toronto street beefs is Regent Park, which is also described as one of the most dangerous areas in Toronto. And one of the most famous rappers coming out of Regent is, of course, Smoke Dogg. Away from the streets, he'd had an early crack at the rap game around 2014-15, with one of the first songs he dropped being the track Still, aka Rabber. He dropped that track along with his homie Mo G, with both of those guys being members of a crew called the Halal Gang, a set of Islamic Toronto street rappers, which Toronto police classify as having their origins in Regent Park street gangs. Now, along with fellow members like Puffy Els, Safe, and Mustafa the Poet, the Halal Gang had truly put on for their neighborhood and done a lot to drive the Toronto drill sound forward. Smoke Dogg's 2018 track Trap House was a breakout hit for him, putting him on the map worldwide. Now, in addition to Regent Park, Rexdale is another area that's been a rival to Jane and Driftwood for quite some time. Being just over 10 minutes drive from Jane and Finch, Rexdale is yet another area with a feared reputation. The Rexdale Crips have a long history that stretches back decades. In fact, Mind Soul 6 on YouTube has a great video breaking it down. Go give that a watch if you're interested. Okay. But here in the modern day, the area of Rexdale has spawned a number of popping rappers out of Toronto. This includes Nav, who isn't really in the streets like that, but also the likes of Young Lava and his brother Young Dubs, Ilium Payback, and from the older generation of Rexdale G's, you've got the likes of Sizzlack, aka LV, who was from Jamestown, Rexdale, and repped a crew called IDS. Sizzlack had the song Realist in the 6, and apparently his ops in Jane and Finch hated him and was straight up IDSK. And another big name from this area who you will definitely hear referenced in a lot of the opposition songs is Slugger. Clearly the beef between these Rexdale mans and the crews coming out of Jane and Finch was incredibly heated, and the disrespect for the people that lost their lives as part of this feud continues in music to this day. Now, yet another hood that is relevant to this story is Falstaff 234, who have a long-running beef with Lawrence Heights, aka Jungle. Coming out of Falstaff, you have rappers like Nine, who also raps over UK beats sometimes. His track Too High is a straight-up banger, along with a few other names who aren't really relevant to this story, and another name that you are going to hear mentioned from Falstaff later on is Clutch. And then finally, you got connections on the south side of Jane and Finch, near Turf Grassway, home to the rapper Doovie, who makes fire music, by the way. He's kind of bringing a sort of NBA young boy, little baby vibe to Toronto. It's good. So him, along with NHS JJ, are from South Jane, and they're going to get involved in the beef towards the end of this story. Now, look, I know that's a lot of people. I could really go on forever. There's a lot of parts of the city and parts of the story and other rappers that I could talk about, but we've got to draw the line somewhere, and these are the people we're going to be talking about today. So now you know who's involved. It's time to get into the back and forth between these crews, taking a look at the music that's dropped out of these areas, how the Toronto rap scene evolved into what it is today, and unfortunately, the insane amount of bloodshed that had to take place in order to make the scene what it is in 2021. Now, like I said at the start of this video, gangs are nothing new in Toronto, and the cops in the city have been spending decades trying to crack down on and bust the clappers and trappers that run these parts of the city. There was the 2005 Project XXX. These were busts on senior leadership in Rexdale Crip gangs, aiming to break up the so-called Jamestown crew. Then you've got 2007's Project Cryptic, a big bust on the Driftwood Crips, but it was a 2011 bust named Project Marvel, targeting a Jane and Finch-based street gang where our story begins.
Handguns, automatic rifles, and more than $100,000 in cash. Items seized during yesterday's cross-country crackdown.
Yes, in a series of nationwide raids that took around 60 gangsters off the streets of Canada, Project Marvel was the authorities' attempt at disrupting organised crime gangs, running things in Toronto's toughest neighbourhood. The indictment claimed that Jane and Finch gang, the Young Buck Killers, were running drugs, guns and cash all over the city, running the streets so ruthlessly that eventually the cops just had to step in. Around 10 people named in the indictment were young offenders, and this includes a 15-year-old YG and a teenage Pressa, but it wasn't the teenagers that the cops were really looking to bust. The feds were really trying to throw the book at the senior leadership of the YBK, with the cops' real prize being Pressa's older brother, Kemar Gardner, who would later start rapping under the name Boondog. Court documents allege that Boondog was the leader of the Young Buck Killers, calling them a violent gang and crack-dealing operation. And things weren't looking good for Boondog. The court documents even referenced a picture that he had taken of himself posing with a bunch of $100 bills spelling out the initials of the gang YBK. That, along with a bunch of other evidence, would make this case incredibly hard to fight, because when Pressa's family home was raided, the cops found numerous guns that were linked to shootings that they tried to tie to Pressa and Boondog. In fact, when Boondog went to trial, he was even apologetic to the judge, saying that he wanted wanted to set a better example for his younger brother, Pressa. Sadly, the remorse didn't really do him any favors, and in the end, the judge slapped him with a whopping 10-year sentence for around 14 drug, gun, and gang-related charges around 2015. Funnily enough, during the case, we found out that informants had allegedly told the police that the teenage Pressa was actually next in line to run the gang after his big brother. But funnily enough, Pressa wasn't even around when all of this went down, because he was already locked up for selling dope from his mother's house at only 15 years old.
Yeah, my brother got convicted for organized crime, the Project Marvel YBK raid. That was 2011, the end of 2011. I was currently incarcerated. Like, I was selling crack through my mom's house and stuff, and I could talk about it because I got convicted for it, you know?
Pressa ended up doing 14 months for this in a young offenders institute, all the while his brother is getting jammed up and his name is being mentioned in the Project Marvel papers. Pressa eventually got out of jail and then had to go on the run for attempted murder, getting caught, doing time, and then beating that AM charge.
Okay.
You were on the run for attempted murder?
Yeah.
They finally caught you?
Yeah, they caught me. They caught me halfway across the other end of the country. I ended up doing like 9 months in jail. I beat the case.
So basically, Pressa spent many years ducking and diving in the mean streets of Toronto. All the while, people around him, on both sides of the city's complicated gang beefs, are dying in the streets like it's nothing. Pressa would lose one of his closest friends on July the 25th, 2015, when his friend Wasi, real name Wasi Skeen Peters, was on the run for a double murder that occurred less than a month before. Whilst on the run for these charges, Wasi was eventually caught one night by the cops who found him sitting in a car outside of a Toronto nightclub. Guns were pulled, and sadly, Wasi was killed by the police in a firefight in downtown Toronto.
Over there, around the corner, there's a vehicle with about 7 or 8 or perhaps more bullet holes in it. According to the SIU, it all happened after 2 a.m. And that's when police officers, approached a vehicle on Peter Street and an altercation started. Now, somewhere during that altercation, a 21-year-old man was shot.
21-year-old Wasi Skeen Peters of Toronto was shot by police overnight in the entertainment district. He's wanted on 2 counts of first-degree murder in the double shooting in a building on Lisgar Street. Now, Abdouali Abdoulaye and Mohamed Abdouel Diri, both 26 years old, were gunned down in a 22nd floor unit of a building on Lisgar Avenue on June the 28th. Another suspect surrendered to police days after the incident.
Of course, the loss of Wasi was devastating for the young guys coming out of the Up Top area. The Tall Up twins honoured his memory with a set of chains bearing Wasi's face, and Pressa would later discuss just how hard it was losing Wasi in a moving Vlad TV interview. The loss of Wasi was really the catalyst for Pressa's rap career, and as a tribute to their fallen brother, Pressa, along with Robin Banks, GD, and FB, would make the tribute song Was Gang. However, while rappers on each side of this street beef begin to make their first significant movements in the music industry, the beef in the street continues on. Because only a week after the murder of Wasi, on the 4th of August 2015, a gunman opens fire in the music nightclub where Drake is hosting an after party for his OVO festival, and this shooting leaves 2 people dead at the scene.
It was almost 3:30 in the morning. Also flying shots that rang out, sending thousands fleeing. At 2 crime scenes, a man and a woman were dead, 3 others injured. The man killed in the club, covered up just beside the pool.
Literally, our officers were running towards live fire.
Police were right in the thick of it.
The deceased victims were named Duvel Hibbert and Aurelia Navarro Fenoy, a man and a woman. And the police actually came out to say after the incident that the male victim was known to them from having been convicted of firearm offences in the past. And eventually, the internet detectives over on Reddit's Torontoology, which is basically the Canadian version of Chiracology, identified that male victim, Duvel Hibbert, as Slugger from Rexdale. Now, Slugger was clearly not well liked by some of the up-top rappers like Pressa. He would actually go on to disrespect Slugger in one of his biggest songs to date, saying on attachments that Slugger got hit up in the party and did a dance. As well as going on to say in his song Secondhand Smoke that he passes the blunt to the guy that hit up Slugger. Furthermore, other up-top rappers like YG posted up on Instagram saying they were smoking Slugger pack. Meanwhile, following that shocking incident at Music Nightclub, Drake himself would send condolences to Slugger and the city, saying that he is plagued and pained by the violence that continues to escalate in his city, saying that he wants to encourage the new generation to show as much value and gratitude as you can for the lives that you've been gifted.
I hear what Drake is saying, and I always say the same thing, like, but it's a cycle. I feel like it's a cycle, and people are always retaliating from what someone else has done. And I think until people start retaliating, of course, and letting, I was going to say letting stuff go, but, people can't let stuff go, especially if, like, the friends have got hurt, killed or something like that. It's always like a retaliation, and it's always like a cycle, and it is sad, though, all these wars, and I hear what Drake is saying, though, I do hear him.
To show as much value and gratitude as you can for the life that you've been gifted. Sending his condolences to both of the deceased and all the families who have lost loved ones to the senseless violence that continues in Toronto. Drake is right, the senseless violence going on the streets of Toronto is a true tragedy. But fortunately, as the local music scene developed, people on both sides of the war in Toronto streets were beginning to see a route out of the struggle through music for the first time. In fact, it was also the very same month, in July 2015, that Smoke Dogg would release his song Trap House. This gets him some mainstream attention, with the song eventually getting a French Montana remix that debuted on Drake's OVO Sound Radio. Drake began to show Smoke Dogg love publicly, letting him open up for him on tours overseas, including in the UK where he met grime legend Skepta, with them two recording a fire collab overseas. Meanwhile, the local rappers back up top were also beginning to see their music take off. Robin Banks had dropped his first breakout track, Up Next, as well as the solo hits Marley's Off a Molly, and his collab with Top 5 Hall of Fame also picking up a lot of steam. And following the release of Wasi gang, Pressa also continues to drop music, like the track Black Mask with Big Bills and GD, and he eventually went on to drop the solo bangers like Demi Hana and To Be Honest. But unfortunately for Pressa, in April 2016, the war in Toronto would reach a dark new low, and Pressa would end up catching a serious case, getting charges that would haunt him for around a year and a half, just as he was beginning to make waves in the music industry. But this wasn't just a regular shooting or beating that you would expect a drill rapper to get caught up in, because the details of this crime were so incredibly shocking and serious that it's by far one of the most twisted things I have ever covered on this channel.
Oh my goodness.
The streets of Toronto reached a new low in April 2016, when allegedly members of Toronto's young buck killers were throwing a party at a rented apartment. At some point, members of a rival Queens Drive Crip gang tried to crash the event, leading to an armed standoff in a hallway where around 8 to 10 shots were fired. Apparently, shots rang out after members of YBK rode up to the apartment in an elevator, getting out of the 25th floor to confront the Crips that had crashed their party, and immediately opening fire when the elevator doors opened, in a scene that was caught on CCTV and looked like something straight out of an old western. Now, in this clip, we see a gunfight in the hallway, followed by an alleged YBK member getting shot at. You can barely make it out in the footage, but essentially a bullet grazes his head, narrowly missing, and after dodging the bullet, he drops to the floor, sliding over to take cover behind the closing elevator door. That bullet in the elevator looked a hair away from being fatal, and as a result, the YBK members that had been shot at would come back with a serious response. Allegedly, the YBK members reconvened at a house in Swansea Mews, where they decided that they would target 2 people who had supposedly told the Crips that their party was going on, with it being said that the next day the YBK members summoned 2 17-year-old Crips to a property. Now, I'm not sure what they thought they were going there for, but when they arrived, they were then held captive for around 48 hours, over which time they were subjected to cruel and unusual torture, the likes of which I have never encountered in any kind of drill or gang story in the developed world. According to the police, the 2 17-year-old youths were tied to a chair and beaten. During their beating, they were forced to play Russian roulette with a loaded handgun, and a shot was fired in the premises. And whatever was going on at that property was so bad that the police received multiple reports of suspicious activity and even visited the property. As a result of this added attention, the victims were then kidnapped and moved to multiple locations around the city to escape the cops as the abuse continued. And at this point, apparently things escalated even further, with it being reported that the 2 kidnappees were forced to do things of a sexual nature with each other. And that's not all. Apparently, these acts were filmed, and then the kidnappers got in touch with the victim's family, negotiating a ransom for their release. And the details for this ransom were apparently $3,000 for the release of the 2 kidnappees, and a final payment of $7,000 within a week, or the videos would be released. I've never heard anything so messed up in my life in one of these stories. So apparently the ransom demands were met, and the victims were released, eventually winding up in hospital, at which point apparently one of the victims made a statement to the police, which was then immediately withdrawn. But apparently there was enough forensic evidence for the police to go ahead and build up a case against the kidnappers without even having cooperating victims. And the police would go on to formally identify a number of potential kidnappers, even going as far as to identify the mother, sister, and grandmother of one of the suspects as people of interest too, because it was alleged that one of the places that the victims were brought to was a family home where everybody was in while this was going on. So, a few days after this ordeal all plays out, on April the 23rd, North Jane rapper Pressa, real name Quinton Gardner, is arrested on charges of kidnapping for ransom, unauthorized possession of a firearm, and assault with a weapon. And when he got to jail, Pressa would quickly end up getting into a fight with some rivals there too. However, there would be some hope waiting for young Pressa on the other side of the wall, because while he was described as a primary instigator of the violence, Pressa's lawyer maintained that he had only played a minor part in the incident, and Pressa wasn't identified as the ringleader of the attack, as apparently the most severe punishment in this incident victim was doled out by a 17-year-old named Ty Shay Pistol Gordon and a 23-year-old named Lincoln Anthony Richards, with cops saying that they were both last seen in the Lawrence Heights Jungle Hood. Now, miraculously, in spite of these serious charges, Pressa was able to make bail, during which time he would be free for a whopping 18 months. And thankfully, Pressa truly used this time wisely, focusing intensely on his music career rather than the streets, finally giving himself an opportunity to escape the violence that had plagued him and his family for years. Pressa's 2016 track Demihana was still picking up steam when he caught his case. Now, that track was actually inspired by Chicago drill songs all about smoking your dead ops, and naturally, it was picking up a bit of steam over in the United States. Pressa also dropped the song To Be Honest in February 2016, and when he got out on bail for those kidnapping charges, he just kept on dropping tracks like 100 Wasi Bars, John Connor, and Lavish, with these tracks leading up to his 2017 mixtape Press Machine. Then his January 2017 hit Novocaine along with Murder Beats was a hit, quickly picking up the attention of both The Weeknd and Meek Mill. And apparently Meek Mill even tried to sign Pressa for a measly $20,000.
Tried to sign Pressa for like $20,000, and he was going to give him a 10-month leased, like, was it like a Rolls Royce? Yeah, it was a Rolls Royce.
Anywho, as he continues to pick up steam, in February 2017, Drake is seen rapping Pressa's Novocaine on social media whilst he's in the UK. Now, Pressa actually went over to London to network in the music biz, where he ended up linking up with Drake himself, who was out there on a European leg of his tour. Pressa even posted up a picture with Drake, along with a caption saying that he had dropped $50,000 on a lawyer. This chance meeting with Drake eventually turned into a full-blown opportunity for Pressa to open up for Drake on tour, with Pressa opening up for Drake in Birmingham, that being his very first show. But the craziest thing of all was the fact that Pressa was even given permission by the court to join Drake touring all over Europe while he was on bail for these serious kidnapping charges. But they let him go, and this really was a genuine opportunity for Pressa to go and do something productive and stay out of trouble, and I guess the courts could actually see that for once. So Pressa joined Drake on tour along with Smoke Dogg from the opposing hood, leading many to believe that during this time Pressa and Smokey had become friends, with them even collaborating during this period. Thing is, not everyone was thrilled about Pressa joining Drake on tour. I mean, he was still sort of on bail for kidnapping torture. Many articles that ran around this time asking what Drake was doing to bring a serious accused criminal on his tour.
Rapper tours with Drake on European tour while on bail for serious charges.
And apparently the Toronto police were never even informed of Pressa's relaxed bail conditions, and the local cops were positively punching the air seeing Pressa running all over Europe having a good time, with the cops allegedly even contacting venues in attempts to get Pressa's shows shut down from another continent. And we even got to witness Pressa finding out about his shows being cancelled firsthand in Noisy's excellent Six Rising documentary about the Toronto drill scene.
Kidnapping and torture is just too far. Sorry for the late notice. The venue only raised the issue now. Sorry again.
Now, this was a dope documentary that covered a lot of aspects of Pressa's exciting come-up. And I think it's really important to just point out how focused he was at this time. He clearly wants to improve his life through the music and get as far away from the streets as possible.
But really, I'm out here. I'm the next guy to be doing it in the industry, you know? Well, what am I doing being a fucking gang member? What does that bring me? Like, you know what I mean? Running around Driftwood Court. Like, what am I doing there, you know? Like, I have better things and better plans for my future, like.
And throughout 2017, whilst on bail, Pressa truly did stay focused, using his time in the UK wisely to collab with Peckham rap legend Giggs on the track Sexy, with that coming out only a month after Giggs had appeared twice on Drake's More Life album. So you know Giggs is tapped in with these Toronto mans heavy. And Pressa went on to drop a whole second mixtape by the end of that year called Pressa Brick. That project featuring arguably the biggest hit of his career so far, Canada Goose, along with fellow Toronto shooter Tory Lanez. Canada Goose sits today at a whopping 23 million views.
Wow, I don't even think I've heard that. I'm going to have to go and listen to it.
End of 2017, when he was eventually cleared of all charges in that kidnapping case. This came after it was declared at a preliminary hearing that there wasn't enough evidence to identify Pressa as the alleged gunman who struck the victim in the head, with it being said that the victim had tried to identify Pressa using a YouTube video of him rapping, with all of that apparently just not being enough to wrap Pressa up in the case. Now, those other two guys that were picked up initially with Pressa were eventually convicted of the crime. Lincoln Richards was brought back to Toronto from Montreal to face charges. Interestingly, he was also a rapper that went by the name Ramsky Gleeshy. He got convicted and sentenced to 6 years, while the alleged ringleader, Ty Shay Pistol Gordon, ended up getting 9 years. So by the time the charges were dropped and the true ringleaders of the crime were sentenced, Pressa had made good on his promise to get out the streets, going legit as a rapper in the music industry. Pressa would eventually leave Toronto, moving to Los Angeles, going full Hollywood, even winding up in a romance with fellow...
That is where I've seen him as well. Yeah, him and... Yeah, I was thinking, wasn't he with someone as well at some point? But yeah, I can see. I remember now. I'm gonna have to check out some of his songs though, because especially the one with Gigs. I didn't know that he had a song with Gigs. And with someone else, I forgot which one I said I was going to check out. I'm definitely going to check out some of his songs. Let me know in the comments if there's certain songs that I should check out. Put them in the comments.
Toronto moving to Los Angeles, going full Hollywood, even winding up in a romance with fellow squeaky voice rapper Coi Leray. But the thing is though, even
why
after
did he
leaving
say
the city,
that?
Pressa would continue to maintain his ties to the streets, but in his music, using his hit songs as opportunities to disrespect his ops, whether fallen or still standing. And even though Pressa turned his life around whilst on bail, not long after he caught that kidnapping case, a well-known rival from Rexdale would be murdered, becoming a name that Pressa would mention and disrespect in his songs frequently to this very day. I'm talking about Sizzlack, aka the realist in the Six.
I'm going to leave it there. The next part is the murder of Sizzlack, so I'm going to finish all of the video in part 2. But I've learned so much so far. I didn't know that Toronto, you know what, I know every place has gangs and has stuff going on, but I just didn't know so much like this was going on, if that makes sense. But it's a good documentary. Trap Law always does good documentaries, so I feel like he always puts them together really, really well. Like I was saying, let me know some songs I should check out in the comments. I'll have a little nose, have a little listen. I just feel like the way Trap Law puts his documentaries together, he just does such good work. They're so good. Like I was saying, if there's anything that he might have missed out so far that I should know, let me know in the comments. Also, I'll do part 2 very soon, so keep a lookout for that. I won't take too long doing part 2, and I will see you very, very soon in the next video. Bye.